It is lovely to welcome you all to BTBJ, some of you for the very first time, and if you're coming back, then welcome back. And it is a joy to get to come together tonight to celebrate Shabbat and to celebrate with Bailey and her family on this very, very exciting weekend. So tonight is a little bit of a warm-up for Bailey, which is great. She'll have a chance to help lead our community in some prayers, and we are very excited to have those of you in the room with us, joining us, those of you who are joining us on live stream as well. And wherever you are, I hope that you are ready to welcome in Shabbat. So I'll be guiding you through that, along with Hannah Benjamin, as we move through our service tonight. So we'll get started by lighting our Shabbat candles. So I want to invite Bailey and Emily and Liz and John to come on up. And we can turn to page 4. And someone who is brave and can use matches, which is not everyone, as it turns out, both brave and the matches part. And they'll light the candles for us, and then I'll invite all of you to join with as we say the blessing so we can breathe in and welcome in the light of Shabbat.
V'tzivanu lehadlik ner shel Shabbat.
Amen. Thank you. Amen. Bailey, you're going to come right over here. And as Bailey gets ready to lead us in Shalom Aleichem on page 5, we recognize that as we begin our service tonight, the words of Shalom Aleichem express that we are welcoming in the angels of Shabbat, and we are praying that they will bless us while our angels are with us, and then we will bid them farewell again until next Shabbat. And so this weekend, you quite literally have lots of angels who are joining you, angels in your lives from all over the place, who we are welcoming into Shabbat, and I am sure it will be a truly blessed experience. So Bailey, if you can lead us on the bottom of page 5.
Shalom Aleichem, Malachei Hasharet, Malachei Elyon, Melech Malachei HaMalachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Boachem Shalom, Malachei HaShalom, Malachei Elyon, Melech Malachei HaMalachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Baruch Nile Shalom, Malachei HaShalom, Malachei Elyon, Melech Malachei HaMalachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Tzechem L'Shalom, Malachei HaShalom, Malachei Elyon, Melech Malachei HaMalachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu.
Thank you very much. You can have a seat. We continue on page 10 with Yedid Nefesh.
Yedid Nefesh, Av HaRachaman, Mishoch Avdach, El Retzonach, Yarutz Avdach, Amo Ayah.
Beharot la Noam Zivach Az Tishchazek V'titrapeh V'hayetalach Shivchat Olam Yadadai-dai-dai-dai 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 Yadadai-dai-dai-dai
We turn to page 14 as we move into the section of our service known as Kabbalah Shabbat. And the intention of all of these prayers that we have here are to help us to settle into Shabbat. So a number of the prayers that we'll sing a little later as we get into our evening service are the same prayers that we have any old evening. They're the same prayers that we have on Sunday night or Wednesday night or Thursday night. But this is the section of the service that really makes this part of our evening distinct. We have a Tat Shabbat going on tonight as well, so you'll probably hear them as they're leaving. And the purpose of all of these prayers is to really allow us to kind of open up into the expansiveness of Shabbat and to let ourselves have that time. And it's not just that we're trying to kind of get through our evening prayers, which is maybe how we might approach it in some other moments, but that we acknowledge that this is a special time. It's a special moment when we come together with friends and with family. It's a special time where maybe we make a dinner or invite guests over. Our little ones are getting to have their first time together as a class, actually, since 2019, when we used to do things like this all the time. And so parents normally during Shabbat in our ECC, every child gets a special Shabbat, and the parents come in, and it's a whole big celebration, but they haven't been coming in the building. So tonight is the 3-year-old all together having their own special Shabbat. So there's all these ways in which we can kind of set this time apart and make it special. And that's the point of our service. And in this prayer in particular, we recognize the joy that we can create when we do that in our lives. And so whether it's the joy of being in this moment right now, or thinking about the joy that we experienced during the week that passed. Because as we move into Shabbat, it's an opportunity that we can leave behind the things that were maybe not so great about the week, if there was anything like that came up for you, any sort of disappointment or any sort of things that you don't need to carry with you any longer. But it's also a time where we can really pause and appreciate with gratitude the things that were really great. And if you have any of that in your life and that you would want to share with the rest of us, we'd love to share that joy with you. So if there's any joy that you experienced this week that you're bringing into Shabbat and you want to raise your hand or shout it out, don't be shy. Feel free. Liz, thank you. She always goes first. I love it.
Always goes first.
I got the joy of being with old friends.
Beautiful.
And
Beautiful. Thank you. Getting to be with friends, especially, I think we really appreciate that even more these days after having had so much time without that. Bailey, how about you?
Being able to see and be around family who maybe you don't get to see as often.
Awesome. I hope you can really kind of soak that in. And in the midst of all of the busyness that you're going to have in the next 24 hours or so, I hope you really can spend some time with especially each of those people that you don't get to see so frequently. It can be hard at big occasions like this to pause, to really appreciate the stepping into it of this is the thing that's happening right now. I've been preparing for this for months, and here it is. And to really kind of take that moment to see each person who came to celebrate with you. Yeah.
we've just been looking forward to this for so many years, and we're so proud of you, and we've had butterflies in our stomach about flying out to celebrate you and your accomplishments. And Bailey likes being about her, and this week.
That's true. And I mean, that's so special to feel the to realize that, the butterflies aren't only felt by the person who's the focus, but by all those who love them, and who have also been looking forward to this moment as well. All of that anticipation and all of that excitement. So, which is something to remember also tomorrow, Bailey, that, when right now it's not a filled room that we have going on, but tomorrow morning it'll be pretty filled. But when you look at all the people, it's a good thing to remember that that's the feeling that pretty much everyone has, is just excitement and anticipation and love coming back at you. Anyone else?
I went to the orchestra this afternoon for the first time since October, so
Nice.
that was really nice.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
That's very exciting.
nothing like bringing in Shabbat with Tchaikovsky and the Philadelphia Orchestra. So, yeah.
Yeah. And I can share that my daughter had a concert this week, which I unfortunately did not get to go to because I was working. But I am feeling joy on her behalf that she was just able to have that experience. It's been so long since the school can come together and they all had to rapid test before they were able to take their masks off for singing, but that's fine. That's the world that we're in. But that they were able to do it. And the most joy I think that I got from all of that was how excited my little one was to go. She's 5. She came home from school so excited to go to a concert. And she's like, well, I have to change. I need a pretty dress. I was like, okay, then let's get you changed. And so it's like you don't realize all of the things that we've forgotten, especially when you see it through the eyes of someone who's never had it. So that was very joyful. And so I'm holding on to that memory as we move into Shabbat. So please join us on page 14 at the arrow as we sing Yismechu Hashamayim.
I just wanted to say one thing about Kidoshima.
Yes.
It just occurred to me. It's really amazing to see children grow up and change. And when I was growing up, things that were cool were sports or whatever. But Bailey said, I just had something really cool happen today to me. I was like, oh, what happened to school? She's like, there's a Holocaust survivor. We got to talk to him over Zoom. And it would just blow me away just how mature she is. And just really kind of a cool thing just to hear your daughter say that talking to a Holocaust survivor was cool. Because she said basically we're one of the last generation, we're like the last generation that's going to actually talk to them. So I was just really impressed by that. And that was kind of one of my highlights of the week.
Some impressive girls you got there, John. I'm glad she had that experience and that you can really appreciate that. His story is pretty incredible, isn't it? Yeah.
Yismechu hashamayim, Yismechu hashamayim, Yismechu hashamayim, v'tayeh haaretz. Yismechu hashamayim, hashamayim, Yismechu hashamayim, hashamayim, Yismechu hashamayim, v'tayeh haaretz. Yeram hayam, yeram hayam, yeram hayam, umelo. Yeram hayam, yeram hayam, yeram hayam, umelo.
Continue on page 16, 4 lines up from the bottom in both the Hebrew and in the transliteration.
Or zarua, la tzadik, o yishrei lev simcha. Or zarua, la tzadik, o yishrei lev simcha. Or zarua, la tzadik, o yishrei lev simcha. Or yishrei lev simcha. Or zarua, la tzadik, o yishrei lev simcha. Or yishrei lev simcha.
We turn to page 23 for Lahadodi, and Bailey will come on up and help lead us in these words And when we sing the words of Lecha Dodi, you'll see in English, the first line and the chorus mean, "Come, my beloved, to welcome the bride. Let us greet Shabbat as she arrives." Very rhymey in English. But that's the kind of anticipation that we're supposed to greet every Shabbat. And so we've already said that some of us are feeling that in this moment, right? Like we're so excited for this Shabbat in particular. But imagine if every single Friday night that same kind of anticipation and joy and butterflies and energy were kind of the way that we lit the candles, set the table, and welcomed every Shabbat. That's a lot of feeling. And so sometimes that might be hard to muster, but it's a good reminder to really just be able to appreciate at each time we get to the end of the week and have a little time with people that we love. And I'm glad that we're feeling it tonight. So Bailey's going to lead us on page 23 with Lecha Dodi.
Lecha Dodi likrat kala, b'nei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha Dodi likrat kala, b'nei Shabbat nekabela. Shemur v'zachor b'dibor echad, Ishmi'anu el hamiuchad, Adonai echad, U'shemo echad, L'shemo tiferet v'litila. Lecha Dodi,
Lecha Dodi likrat kala, b'nei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha Dodi likrat kala, b'nei Shabbat nekabela.
Likrat Shabbat lechu v'nelcha, ki hi mekor havraha, merosh mikedem nisucha, tov ma'aseh b'machshava tehila. Lecha Dodi,
Lecha Dodi likrat kala, b'nei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha Dodi likrat kala, b'nei Shabbat nekabela.
Mikdash melech ir melucha, kumitzi'im mitoch hachafecha, Rav l'shevet be'er mechavacha, ve'hu yachmo alayechem la. Lecha Dodi,
Lecha Dodi likrat kala, b'nei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha Dodi likrat kala, b'nei Shabbat nekabela.
We continue on page 25 with the last two verses.
Yamim u'smol tifrotzi, v'et Adonai taritzi, al yad ish ben partzi, v'nismecha v'nagila. Lecha Dodi, Lecha Dodi likrat kala, b'nei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha Dodi likrat kala, b'nei Shabbat nekabela.
We rise and face the door as we symbolically welcome our Sabbath bride.
Boi v'shalom ateret bala, gam b'sicha u'zola, toch emunei am segula, boi chala, boi chala. Lecha Dodi, Lecha Dodi likrat kala, b'nei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha Dodi likrat kala,
continue on page 27 with the Psalm for Shabbat.
מזמור של יום השבת, להודות לאדוני, לזמר שמך ולהגיע ולזמר
Page 28.
צדיק אתה מה יפרח, כארץ בלבנון, איש שתולים בבית אדוני, בחצרות אלוהינו יפריחו. עוד ינובון בסבח, דשנים ורעננים יהיו להגיד, כי ישר אדוני צורי צורי ולא
We turn to page 39, and as we move into Baruch Hu, it's our call to worship, and it's the official start of our evening service. And I will invite you to rise if you're comfortable and able to do so.
ברכו את אדוני המבורך.
Baruch Adonai Haborach Leolam Vaed.
ברוך אדוני המבורך לעולם ועד.
You may be seated.
ברוך את אדוני המלך העולם שברו רבים וחכמים שברים ותהים ומה ביום ולילה, מה ביום ולילה, אדוני צבאות שמו חי וחיים תמיד ימלוך עלינו לעולם ועד. ברוך את אדוני המבורך ברבים.
Amen. We continue on page 40.
אהבת עולם את ישראל, עמך אהבת. תורה ומצוות, חוקים ומשפטים, אותנו לימדת. על כן אדוני אלוהינו, בשוכבנו ובקומנו, נצליח בחוקיך, ונשמח בדברי תורתך, ובמצוותיך לעולם ועד. כי הם חיינו לאורך ימינו, לאורך ימינו, ובהם נהיה יומם ולילה, יומם ולילה. ולך תצא ממנו לעולמים ברוך את אדוני, אוהב עמו ישראל.
We turn to page 41, and I invite Bailey to come back up to help lead us in Shema and Via Hafta.
Shema
Shema
Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Yahavta et Adonai Elohecha bechol lavcha ubechol nafshecha ubechol meodecha v'hayu הדברים האלה אשר אלוהים מצווך היום על לבביך ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך ושרתם להיות על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובישעריך.
We continue silently in Hebrew or in English on page 42.
Adonai Elohechem emet.
We continue on page 44.
ומלכותו ורצון קיבלו עליהם משה ומרים בני ישראל לחנו שירה בשמחה רבה ויאמרו כולם מי כמוך באלים אדוני מי כמוך נדר בקודש נורא תהילות הספר מלכותך ראו בניך וכן לפני משה זליל ויאמרו אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד ונאמר כי ודע אדוני את יעקב וגלום יד חזק ממנו ברוך אתה אדוני גא ישראל.
We turn to the top of page 45 for Hashkivenu, which is a prayer that we say every evening for peace and protection. And we ask that God spread out this sukkah of peace, this canopy of peace over us and over the entire world. And as we sing these words, Ufros Aleinu Sukkat Shlomecha, I invite you to take a moment to hold in your hearts, in your mind's eye, all of the people or the places in our world. One might be calling us right now. All the people or places in the world who might be in need of a little bit of extra protection in this moment. So someone you know who might be in need of healing, or the parts of the world that are stricken with war or famine, whatever it might be. So hold all of that in your heart, and just as we kind of brought more light into our space as we lit the candles, we can kind of send that light, send our prayers out to all those who are in need. So I invite you to sing with us 3 lines down, Ufros Aleinu Sukkat Shlomecha, both in the Hebrew and in the transliteration.
Ufros Aleinu Sukkat Sukkat Shlomecha Ufros Aleinu Sukkat Sukkat Shlomecha Baruch Adonai Haborei Sukkat Shalom Aleinu v'al kol Mo Yisrael v'al Yerushalayim.
Turn to the top of page 46, and Bailey joins us again for Vishamru.
Vishamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat Lasot et ha-Shabbat L'dor Tamerit Olam V'ni v'nei Yisrael Oti le'olam Oti le'olam Oti le'olam Vishamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat Lasot et ha-Shabbat L'dor Tamerit Olam Ki sheishe yamim asa Adonai et ha-shamayim v'et ha'aretz Vishamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat Lasot et ha-Shabbat L'dor Tamerit Olam Ubayom hashvi'i Shabbat vayinachash Shabbat vayinachash Shabbat vayinachash Vishamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat Lasot et ha-Shabbat L'dor Tamerit Olam. Vikikada, Vikada, Shemei Rava.
Amen.
Yama Divra Kirite, Vialik Maute, Vihayechonu, Vyomechon, Uvaye Bechol Beit Yisrael. Bagala, Bagala, Uvizman Kariv. V'yimeru, Amen. Yehei Shmei Rava Mevora. Li'alav li'amei amaya Yitbarach. Yitbarach v'yishtaba, v'yitbar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh, v'yitadar v'yithaleh v'yithalal Shemei Kedusha. Lehela Mechol Hirata v'shirata Tushbechata v'nechemata Damimra v'ne'ama Yimeru Amen.
We turn to page 47 for our Amidah, and in our evening service, we move through this part of the service on our own, silently. And so this is an opportunity for us to either move through the words in Hebrew or in English, or to take a moment for your own personal and silent reflection. So I'll invite you to rise, if you're comfortable and able to do so. And the Amidah begins on page 47 and continues through to page 52.
Say shalom Yiramav, Uyaseh shalom aleinu, V'yakol Yisrael, V'imru, V'imru, Amen. Yaseh shalom, Shalom aleinu, V'yakol Yisrael, Yaseh shalom. Yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu v'yakol Yisrael v'yimaru. Amen.
You may be seated. So this week's Parsha, as Bailey knows very well, is entitled Kidoshim, which translates as holy, like holiness, or when we think about kiddush or sanctifying, that's what we'll say later when we say the blessing over the wine or grape juice. It's somehow about kind of setting something apart. And this portion, and really for that matter, all of Torah and our Jewish textual tradition, is very much concerned with defining and instructing how we go about achieving and maintaining holiness for ourselves, for the world, and for God. And the laws of holiness, which extend all the way through chapter 19, they open by stating at the very beginning of the parsha, Kidoshim tihiyu ki kadosh ani Adonai Elohechem, that each of you, every person, should be holy because I, Adonai, your God, because I am holy. So there's a lot that we can unpack in this very short sentence, and I say all the time to my students when thinking about Divrei Torah that it could be on an entire parsha, an idea, or just one sentence or even one word. But essentially, we learn here and really all throughout Jewish tradition that every one of us must always strive to emulate God through our deeds and through our words. What that means maybe is a whole other conversation. But by doing so, we not only become holy ourselves, but we also in some way can contribute then to spreading this holiness throughout the world and kind of be emissaries of God in that way. So the laws of holiness that then follow in this parsha, which is also, this section is called the Holiness Code. And it's a sort of a whole kind of important area of Torah that we have. And it addresses all areas of life. So my question for you is that if you were writing a code of holiness with the stated intention that I just shared for human behavior, what would you include? What feels important to be a part of such a code? And it could be things maybe that we should do or that we shouldn't do, maybe things that we say. What would you include? There's no right or wrong answer. I'm just curious. And if you know a little something about the parsha already, as I know some of you have spent some time with this, and Anna's parsha is next week, so she's also kind of like swimming in this little part of our Torah. If you know something that's there, it's okay to share that as well, if you think that it's an important thing that you'd want to include as well. Yeah.
Well, this parsha is very particular to a certain part of our lives. Probably wouldn't be at the top of my list,
Okay.
per se, but, just what God decided to write, so, obviously, more important things about being ethical and honorable and all that stuff. I mean, this stuff is important too, I guess.
Good. Okay.
But it's not, again, it's a pretty literal and,
There's a lot of specifics.
base activity type
Yeah.
stuff.
Good.
That probably wouldn't make my
Make your top 10.
my top 10.
So if we were making one, you would want it to be a little broader about
like Noah's laws, like the Noah's laws.
Yeah.
I mean, that's right. That's because that doesn't mean that's not any religion. That's most religions. Obviously they say in those laws if you operate in that environment and you don't happen to be Jewish,
Right.
you get the same
Right.
reward as if you were Jewish. So that would be where I would start.
Great. So we have the Noahide laws all the way back at the beginning of Bereshit, the beginning of Genesis, and those are a lot more universal. And as we move through Torah, we start to get more and more particularistic here, and a little more granular with what we're doing. And you might ask why a little bit, what was the need for that? Yeah.
I'm just going to say one other thing. Not because I read the whole.
We're supposed to read it every year.
It also was a big thing about these laws that everybody else at that time weren't operating in these environments. They were doing all the things in this parsha that God says not to do.
Exactly.
And God, and the way I understand it is, and this is from how some sages say, is that God watches over the Jewish people and watches over the Jewish people in specific in Jerusalem, in Israel. It's a little bigger now in the diaspora. But
Right.
and other beings, be they be angels of some sort, are responsible for other nations, per se.
Oh,
I think
interesting.
that's how the Torah worships. And we have to be the light upon nations, and we have to do things a certain way to show. Now everybody operates in these, but at that time not.
Right.
So we were showing, and because God has direct vision to us,
Right.
we have a higher responsibility than God's emissaries watching the other people. So we have to operate at like when it's Hebrew natural, we operate at a higher standard.
Right.
So to speak. So back then that was a big difference words too.
Right, and that is a very important piece of what you see here in our Torah portion. That you can ask maybe some of the specifics of like, well, why this particular thing or why that, and because in some ways they might just be good things for us to do, depending on what it is that we're talking about, of like how to take care of the widow or the orphan and like the ways in which we should do that. But in other cases, it very much was setting us apart. If Kiddush is about making something separate, making something holy, setting it apart somehow, and sanctifying it by means of doing that, it was setting us apart. So one of the pieces that you get, I think it's in like chapter 19, verse 27, is the instruction to not cut your side locks. So if you've ever seen, payas, like long, curly, like side locks on religious men, or who are religious in a particular way, or men who don't shave their beards, that's why. Because there's a specific instruction to do that. Thank you, Cantor Benjamin, for show and tell. Because it's not only that's like on trend with like a particular group of people, and it's not that like all Jews are hipsters. It's that like it actually says that. And so why? Because that was supposed to set us apart from, idolatrous people who maybe had a tradition of sort of cutting their hair differently. So as you said, like these are from a very particular time, a very particular context. And so when we think about what would have been kind of holy and like setting us apart in some way for some reason, maybe so that we can either, understand sort of who's in and who's out, and like follow our own laws, and maybe also to be demonstrative of the way that we want to be, in the world and in relationship with God and that holy connection. All of that was true. So right, that might all translate, or some of it might translate for us today, and some of it might not so much. And understanding it in its context is a really important piece, and there's a lot that we can still learn from it today. Did you have your hand up, Bailey?
I just wanted to say, like, make sure you're treating everyone like the way you want to treat it with one-on-one.
Good.
Making sure that
Awesome. So Bailey has spent some time with Parsha. And you should come to Anna's Bat Mitzvah next week, because she might be talking about some of that as well. And it sounds like both of you are sort of thinking along the lines of like some of the specifics are maybe less important of like, do this, don't do that in a particular way, but that what you would want to put into such a holiness code is the sort of broader ethical ways of being in the world, of this is how we should be treating other people, and maybe this is how we should be treating other people because this is how we want to be treated. Awesome. That basically was my whole Devar Torah that I just read. Well, I'll tell you the rest, but Bailey just gave it. Anyone else want to share any ideas there? Okay. So something to think about, because I think that, it is important to remember that this all kind of came to us at a particular moment. We've been reading it every year for thousands and thousands of years. And, always kind of adding our own layers to it, I think, is an important piece. That we will find, and we can find meaning in the text itself. And we can also think about, well, what if we were doing this today? Would we have the same hairstyle? How would we be setting things apart differently for whatever reason because of what we're seeing in the world? So, when you read through more of this tomorrow, as you have your Chumash in front of you, if you have not, already prepared for this Shabbat by reading the Parsha again, you'll see that it covers a lot of areas. That we find in this section laws about family relationships, about Jewish rituals, about business ethics, and behavior toward those less fortunate, as I mentioned. And there's even laws, as I said, about sort of hairstyles. So the list is quite extensive, from like the very specific to the very broad. And in the midst of all of these laws, there is one that happens to be one of my favorite lines. And Bailey, you called it. It is verse 17, which instead of addressing our actions, actually seems to address maybe our feelings even, the way that we should be, like the attitude that we should be kind of approaching the world with. And this line starts out by telling us not to hate our kinsfolk, or incur guilt, or hold a grudge. And then it goes on. And there is a lot that we can, unpack here. But the verse ends with the words, V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. That we learn that you should love your neighbor as yourself. So some might wonder what this line is doing here in the midst of what Bailey knows is a very extensive list of rules. And that most of the instructions in this parsha are about actions. They're about things that we should do or that we should not do or do in a particular way for particular reasons. And yet this line that tells us to love our neighbor as ourselves seems to be speaking to something a little bit deeper than just our sort of surface actions. So Tamar Cohen Eskenazi, in a fabulous collection, it's called the Women's Torah Commentary, she notes that holiness is very much about creating relationships. And so if all of this is about the holiness code, that holiness itself is about creating and nurturing relationships. And that what we learn from this is that the proper response to suffering that we might see around us isn't vengeance, but it is compassion, it is sensitivity, and a commitment to preventing such abuse in the future. And so to love God, she says, is to love others, those who are like us and also those who are not. Over the years, scholars and rabbis have asked a lot of questions about this particular line. And the biblical commentator Nahama Leibovitz asks, how are we to love others as ourselves with equal force, irrespective of their conduct? That's a particular challenge that we might have in our lives. And you don't have to be a parent or a teacher to know how challenging it can be to love all people all the time as yourself. Any human who interacts with other humans can appreciate that this can be a challenge at times. Rashbam, who was an 11th century French commentator, wondered if this instruction should even apply to those who are wicked. Maybe that's just an exception altogether, and when we say love your neighbor as yourself, we actually mean to say the nice ones. But the really wretched ones, maybe it's okay if you kind of leave them aside from this particular instruction. But perhaps one of the most difficult things to grasp is how we can control such feelings at all in the first place. As Emily Dickinson and then Selena Gomez went on to say, the heart wants what it wants. So alternatively, perhaps this line, love your neighbor as yourself, is not specifically referring to our feelings at all, but to how we might be inspired to act or not in the world and with the people who we encounter around us. After all, when we talk about loving God, it is not the kind of love that would entail sitting around and drawing hearts in our notebooks and pining away for a divine relationship. But loving God in the way that it's meant here is something that's supposed to lead us toward just action and toward striving to be a better version of ourselves. Because it's through our actions that we have the ability to make the world a better place, to make the world special, to make the world holy. And in that way, each of us can then become holy beings in holy relationship with the world, with one another, with the land, and by extension, in holy relationship with God. One of my teachers of Musar in rabbinical school, Rabbi Ira Stone, he once pointed out to us, this is an important line in the study of Musar, which is an ethical tradition of sort of honing our actions and our attitudes in the world. And he pointed out that this particular verse, V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, love your neighbor as yourself, appears right in the middle of chapter 19. And chapter 19 appears right in the middle of the book of Leviticus. And the book of Leviticus appears right in the middle of the entire Torah. You'll see it tomorrow when it's on the table. You can kind of see, the Eitzim or even this week. I keep saying to folks, whoever you're picking for Hagbah, you're good because you're even right now. It's not in the beginning or the end. You're right in the middle. And so this tidbit might just be a little fun fact about Torah. But I choose to instead really notice and raise up the importance of that fact, that this line is what appears at the center of Torah, at the center of the holiness code, and at the center of our entire tradition in that way. And these laws that have been passed down for thousands and thousands of years are essential to Judaism and Jewish people, not because we follow them all to the T, and that we even can to this day even follow all of them. But from the 10 Commandments that Moses received on Mount Sinai to the hundreds of other instructions that were given throughout Torah and that our rabbis continue to expound upon even today, all of this is essential to who we are as Jews and to who we are as Jewish community when we come together. But that with all of that, with the books and pages that we have, above all else, the line that is central is v'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, to love your neighbor as yourself. All of us must be good people, good neighbors, good citizens, good friends, and that by being our best selves and by treating others how we would want to be treated, as Bailey said, this is how we can both build and maintain a holy community wherever it is that we go. As Gandhi says, we can be the change that we wish to see in the world. So as we move through this Shabbat, may we each carry with us this central instruction to love our neighbor. And may we also remember that in order to do this, that we must also love ourselves, first and foremost. So, Ken Yehiratzon, may it be God's will that we all have the wherewithal to do that. You'll have to let me know how it goes. Shabbat Shalom. So I want to invite Bailey back to the Bima as we turn to page 55, and she is going to lead us in Kiddush.
You need a glass of grape juice for that.
Oh, yeah.
You do.
Gonna need grape juice. Okay.
You can drink. Just
When do I drink? At the end?
drink at the end.
Okay.
Yeah.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei peri hagafen.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kishanu mitzotav v'ratavanu, v'shabbat kotso v'rahava u'v'ratzon, yimei lanu, zikaro le'maseh v'reishit. Ki yom tehillah, lamigra'e kodesh, zecher l'tziat mitzrayim. Kivanu v'harta, v'yotanu kidashta, mi'ohamim, v'shabbat koshecha, v'ahava u'v'ratzon, imhaltanu. Baruch atah Adonai, mekadesh haShabbat.
Amen.
Hi. So we turn now in our service to page 63 because we find ourselves in this moment in a period of time known as counting the Omer, where we are counting the days from Pesach, from the second Seder, the second night of Pesach, all the way to Shavuot. And so we'll be counting 49 days between these two holidays. And every single evening, we're taught that we should count the Omer, and Jewish days start the night before. So we're counting Shabbat, this new day. And that we're also supposed to recognize that every day counts, and appreciate the steps that it took our ancestors, and that it maybe takes us as well to move from the liberation that we talked about at Pesach, and that perhaps we put ourselves in the story and experience, all the way to the revelation at Sinai. So that's a process. It doesn't happen in an instant. It happens over time. And so we can also kind of notice where we are in that. So I'll invite you to recite the blessing with me on page 63, and then we will turn to page 66 to count the Omer. And we will be doing the very last one on the page. Yesterday was day 20. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kishanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al tzirat haomer. Hayom echad v'esrim yom, shehem shlosha shavuot la'omer. Today is 21 days, 3 weeks of the Omer. And if you kind of follow the Kabbalistic overlay that we can place onto each of these weeks and each of these days, every week is connected with an emanation of God, as is every day. And so we are currently in the week, or finishing up the week of Tiferet, which is splendor or beauty, and we are in the day of Malchut, which is majesty, and it's sort of the point of the sporadic tree that is like closest to our world, of the way in which we experience God and God's presence in our human clothed world. And so taken together, Devin Spire wrote about this day, Majesty of Beauty. And she writes, I no longer seek out the end of the journey or the comfort of colorful horizons to mark moments of transcendent pause. In fact, I do not look for day or night at all, but the truth that time outwits the most beautiful conveniences. At bottomless source greater than the futility of ending and beginning. As I watch the wonder of my world unfolding, I let my desire for clarity and completeness give way to awareness, that destiny manifests every moment, and that my heart sees what eludes my eye. Departures and delays are the universe's blessed and true arrivals. All right. We turn now to page 56, and I invite you to rise if you're comfortable and able to do so for Alina.
Aleinu l'shabeach l'Adon ha'kol, latid kirua liotzer reshit, shelo asanu k'goyei ha'aratzot, shelo samanu k'mishpachot ha'adama, shelo asanu k'goyei ha'aretz, v'gor aleinu k'chol ha'mona, v'anachnu korim, u'mishtachavim u'bodim, b'ftei melech malchei hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, v'ne'em b'rehaya Adonai l'melech al kol haaretz, b'yom ha'hu, yeh Adonai echad, u'shmo echad.
You may be seated. We continue on page 58 with Kaddish Yatom, and this is an opportunity in our service to remember those whose loved ones have passed away recently, for whom you might be reciting Kaddish, as well as those who passed away at this time in years past, for whom you might be observing a yard site. This week in our community, we extend our deepest sympathy to Mark Spencer and his family on the passing of his sister and their aunt Helen Aaron. Our condolences to Joff Barbash on the passing of his grandmother. Our condolences to Jory Broad, Carly Grice, and Lindsay Heckman on the passing of their grandmother. And our continued condolences to Steve Gallup and his family on the passing of their beloved father and grandfather and a longtime BTBJ member, Herb Gallup. If you are currently in mourning or observing a yard site or would like to say Kaddish, I invite you to rise as we turn to page 58 to recite the words of Kaddish Yatom. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei rabbah v'alma divra kirutei v'amlich malchutei v'chaye hon v'yomei hon v'chaye dechol beit Yisrael Ba'agala uvizman kari v'imru amin. Yehei shmei rabba mevarach li'olam u'lamei almaya. Yit barach v'yish tabach v'yit pa'ar v'yit rumam v'yit naseh. V'yit hadar v'yit aleh v'yit halal shemei t'kudashah brichu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechamata. Ta'amiran bi'alma v'imru amen. Yehi shlama rabba min shemaya v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. May the one who creates peace on high bring peace to us, to all Israel, and to all who dwell on earth. And we say together, amen. Amen. We will close this evening with, on page 75, with a blessing that some parents have the tradition of saying to their children every Friday night. I got to sing it with the ECC kids earlier. It was very cute watching them all topple on each other as they hugged one another. And it is one of the oldest blessings that we have. So if you would like to, either think about your loved ones who might be far away to send these blessings, or snuggle up with anyone who you feel comfortable touching in this moment who might be next to you, we will recite these words together. May God bless you and protect you.
יאר אדוני פניו אליך ויחונך.
May God's face give light to you and show you favor.
יישא אדוני פניו אליך וישם לך שלום.
May God's face be lifted toward you and bestow upon you peace. Came you here at Zone. May it be God's will.
Amen.
Be who you are and be blessed in all that you are and all that you will become. Shabbat Shalom, everyone.